A leader's team can stay productive long enough to create a sense of stability. That's what makes this dangerous. The team is still producing, the market is still moving, enough is still working to make the business look intact. So from your seat, it feels like everything is working, the market shifts, and the business keeps moving. Conditions change, and the team adjusts. The reports still show enough production to defend the result. Senior leadership still sees activity. But the problem is not that outside conditions change. They always do. The real problem is when repeated external change keeps forcing reshaping inside the team and market. Because the business was never built deeply enough to absorb those shifts without having to keep reorganizing around them. That's the point most leaders miss. They think they're watching adaptation. But what they're actually watching is a model that keeps having to reshape itself just to keep producing, and eventually that breaks. I spent 23 consecutive years in the top 1% of wealth management as an advisor, leader, and executive building and running multi-billion-dollar businesses. This video is about how a leader business keeps concentrating around what external conditions are rewarding and becomes too narrow to pivot cleanly before the exposure shows. I'll show you what gets missed when the same parts of the business keep carrying too much, competitive standards keep shifting, and the model keeps being adjusted like the change is temporary. And I'll share why it failed, what the leader kept misreading while the business kept moving. Here's how it starts. You don't see the structural breakdown while it's happening. When you're running an operation at this scale, the warning signs don't show up as a red flag on a dashboard. They show up as daily choices that look entirely correct in the moment. So let's talk about exactly how this happens. Your market is moving and the team is still producing. Enough is still working to make the business look intact. So you keep assuming your people are adjusting to execute when external conditions shift. From the outside, that looks like strength. You see your team still finding ways to move business. You see certain parts of the market still producing. You see pipeline activity still happening. You see enough execution to believe the team is responding. So you keep reallocating attention, support, and focus toward the areas that are still winning. That feels like management. And in the moment, it's understandable. Because when you're sitting in the leader's seat, you don't have the luxury of stopping the operation to examine every structural implication. The number still has to move. The team still needs direction. Partners still expect engagement. Senior leadership still wants to forecast. Clients still need to be served. So you keep leaning into what's still working. The members of your team who are producing get more attention. The parts of the operation still carrying results get more focus. The solution areas still getting traction get reinforced. The partner channels still creating activity get protected. And because enough is still moving, it can keep feeling like control. But underneath that, the shape of the market is changing. What had been more broadly distributed starts becoming more concentrated. More of the team's energy keeps getting pulled toward the same areas because those are still the places carrying the most visible weight. More of the results starts depending on fewer people, fewer channels, fewer conversations, and fewer areas of the offering. That's where the narrowing starts. Not because anyone stopped working, not because the team lost effort, because everyone kept organizing around what was still winning. And that can look like leadership for a while until it becomes dependency. But there is another pressure building at the same time. The market is not just shifting around you. The standard is moving too. Some of the value your team was still relying on no longer creates the same edge it once did. What used to help the team stand out becomes more common, more expected, less decisive. Competitors catch up, clients become more informed, offerings get packaged better across the market. Solutions that once created separation start becoming table stakes. So now both pressures are building at once. The business is becoming more concentrated internally, and the market is becoming more competitive externally. That's where you misread what was really happening. And once that starts happening, the judgment is not whether the team can keep pushing. The judgment is whether the model can keep holding. And looking back at your operation, that friction didn't happen from your lack of effort. It happened because of three distinct structural misreads. The first thing you missed was how much of the market had started depending on the same parts of the business to keep carrying results. What looked like strength was already becoming concentration. Because concentration isn't always obvious when results are still there. The number may still look fine, the team may still look productive, the market may still look active. But underneath it, more of the business is being carried by fewer areas than the reporting makes clear. That means the next change has less room to move through. The second thing you missed was that the market standard had moved. Parts of the value your team was still relying on no longer created the same separation they once did. That does not mean the value disappeared. It means the market absorbed it. Clients expected it. Competitors matched it. Partners heard similar versions of it from other firms. What used to help your team win now only help your team stay in the conversation. That is a major difference. And if you don't see that difference early enough, you keep leading as if the old edge still has the same force. It doesn't. The third thing you missed was how much repeated external change the market model would need to absorb. You kept adjusting like the shifts were temporary, but they were not temporary anymore. They become part of the environment itself. That is where leaders lose time. They manage one shift as if things will normalize. Then they manage the next shift the same way, then the next one. And each time the business has to reshape again. But at some point, what you're calling adjustment is actually proof that the model doesn't hold cleanly. You aren't leading through a temporary disruption, you're leading inside a different environment, and the business has not been built deeply enough to absorb it. That's when the consequence hits. It rarely shows up as a sudden revenue drop. Instead, it shows up in the operating feel of the business. Everything takes more from you. Your team's pipeline activity is still there, but it's harder to trust. Your forecasting gets less clean, and you're depending on fewer paths to get there. New direction takes longer to land. Initiatives become harder to translate into real execution, and different parts of the team keep getting asked to carry more of the business more than they ever should. That is where you feel it. You are no longer managing change. You are managing a business that has to reorganize itself every time conditions move. And that is exhausting for the team, for the market, and for you. So when the next shift arrives, the team cannot just adapt. It has to reshape all over again. Every time that happens, the model loses more balance. The team can carry the business for a while, but they cannot sustain a model that requires constant reshaping just to hold production. You don't get exposed only when results stop. You get exposed when the business keeps having to reorganize itself to stay productive because the model underneath can no longer absorb external change without losing its shape. That's when you start asking the team to keep carrying change the model should have been built to absorb, and what looks productive on the surface becomes weaker underneath than you realize. If every market shift requires your team to reshape, the model is not absorbing change. Your team is carrying it, and there is a limit to how long that can hold. At Elite Fate, this is the architecture we audit, because in a world full of information, people choose authority that protects them from being wrong at the most expensive moments. Every week, I share what successful wealth advisors and leaders need to know to determine whether their success is built to last. This is Elite Fate. There's more of this on the channel. Subscribe to see more.